Hello guys, and today we'll be going to do is many-to-many relationship in Prisma, the way of Prisma. If you're using, okay, there are two ways of doing many-to-many relationship in Prisma, and there it's called explicit many-to-many relationship and implicit many-to-many relationship. So if you're doing a many-to-many implicit relationship, it's much more easier and way more easier than the one-to-one relationship and one-to-many relationship. But if you're doing explicit, you have to do a lot of things, a lot of writing, and we will skip that. Like how I'm lazy and possibly you're lazy, we're going to use the simplest route of how to do a many-to-many relationship. So we'll go to our code, and in our code what we'll be doing is we'll be adding a module for the category module, their model. So we'll create here a model, and in the model we'll create a category table. So as usual, we'll say book, is like similar to what we have done on previously. We'll mention ID, integer, and default auto increment, and as well we'll be adding name as the string. Other than that, we don't need to have anything else, so the category will have a name, and that's it. Now to mention the relationship and which one is doing the relationship with the category, and that will be the book. And what we'll mention is the book could be a thriller, a mystery, and horror, or a romantic book, but it could have several categories altogether. So that could be, and the category as well could have several books under one category, right? So category could have many books, and the books could have many categories. So that would be many to many relationship. So in order for us to do the implicit configuration for Prisma, so the implicit way, there are several ways: explicit and implicit. So the implicit, what we'll do is, since the category will have a list of books, we'll specify here as books, and we'll make it book as an array. That's the first part. The second part, will go to book, and we'll mention here categories, and in the categories we'll mention the type of it, and that will be category. And it won't be just one type of category, will be an array of categories, so that will be an array here. Now that's it, and even the syntax highlighting, or the linter is giving no errors, because we are done with it. That's it. Just like that, we already have a relationship between the books and categories as a many-to-many relationship. So we'll add our migration here. We'll mention yarn, and we'll say yarn Prisma migrate name, so that will be category relation. Now it generates our migrator, and it created fine, and it is working fine. We'll use yarn Prisma generate in order for us to generate the parts. Next step, we'll add our logic for the category. We'll go to the category real quickly, and we'll update our category.service. As usual, the same thing as over again. So we'll go on import, and import will mention Prisma, and it is coming from config. So Prisma, actually config and Prisma. Now the next part here will say return Prisma dot category, and we'll mention create, and in here we'll say data category DTO. And again, we have here C, capital C, but we don't want C. So now here we have our category DTO, and we created it. Now we will do that as well for the categories. We'll say return, and in the return we'll mention Prisma dot category find many, and in the find many we'll mention include author, not author, come on, tab 9, it will be books, and the other one as well will be doing that too, and we'll specify as not author again, and that will be category, no, actually books, don't forget. Now that will be it for the service. We'll go to our controller, we'll import it here, import all as categories service from, come on, tab 9 is going lazy. Alright, we'll be mentioning category.service, and in here create category and get category. We'll fill it up here, the logic. Similar to what we have done in the book, we'll say const new book, and what we'll be creating will be, okay, that will be async. We'll specify async, and in here we'll specify await, and what we'll be using is category service, and in here we'll mention request dot body, and then we'll log this new book. Actually, my bad, it's not new book, but it will be new category. My bad, new category, and new category, and then here we'll mention, I hope that I don't forget, response.json, and in here we'll say new category. The next part would be the get categories. We'll just mention const categories, and in here we'll say categories without the request body, and in here we'll mention it will be async, and we'll respond, let's return response.json, and what we'll be returning is a list of categories. So now we are finished with this part, and we finished with the category service, and route seems to be fine. We'll run it and test it out. So yarn dev and we'll check out our endpoint. Instead of books, we'll be mentioning categories, and it seems to be fine, but we don't have a data. So we'll go to our Thunder client, and wait, we don't have several things on. Okay, I didn't save this part. Okay, let me save that. Let's rerun it here again, and we'll mention Thunder client again, Thunder client, and in here, instead of this one, we'll create a new request, and the new request we'll be having is what will it be? That will be categories, and in categories we'll specify post, and in here we'll specify the body, and what we'll be doing is we will create one, and that will be you could say mystery. Now we are creating one, so we will just send this out, post, that will be it. Now we received it, name mystery, and books at the moment it has nothing. Now we have tested out our categories is fine, and now let's check out in our, let's refresh this, and we received it. The next step is, how are we adding a list of books now? Either what we could do is we could do a nested query where the moment we create a category will create the books as well, but that doesn't make sense. But what we'll be doing is we will be using the logic of the book, whereby we are updating the book, and within the book we'll be mentioning that add the book of that particular book ID towards the certain book category that will be the mystery. Let's update our book service first, and we'll be handling the update book here. And in here what we are going to do is similar to what we have done here, create and find many, but a bit different, a slight difference. And what we will do here is Prisma and then we'll mention our model here, and then here we'll mention update. In the update, there are two things that we need to know for the update to happen, and one is the data itself that we are trying to update, and we need to have the ID of that particular model that we want to update, and that will be using where property, and then where property will mention the ID that we are searching for. So the ID is the primary key of our model, but in order for us to have the primary key, we need to update our update book property parameters, and here we'll mention specified as integer ID type of number. So now there is no problem because it got the where and the book. Next step is going to the book controller, and in book controller what we have to do in update book is first things first, in the update book when we check in our router. So when we see in the router, we are asking for the parameter ID, so we will receive the ID property, the ID variable from the endpoint, so that will be the ID for that particular book that we are trying to update. So we'll go to our controller first. In our controller, what we want to get first is the ID itself. So we'll mention here the ID property coming from request.parameter. The next step, what we are going to do is similar to what we have done in our user, where we have done a nested write, and in our nested write in our user, let's just look at our nested user controller here. In order for having to do any relationship between the address and the user, what we had to do is a nested write, where we destructured the address from the request.body. And the next part, what we had done here is we modified our address to have the property called create, and that create will have address. So we'll do that similar to that, but instead of using create, because we already have category, what we are going to use is another property, and that property is regarding as Prisma, and those properties, I think I'll showcase the different types available in another section. So first we will do the same logic as here, but slightly different, with changing some parts of it. So in our request.param, so that's it. Now here we'll mention our property, and in here we'll ask for our request.property. So what we are destructuring here, instead of the category object, we are assuming that we already have category ID. So we'll mention category ID. So we are getting category ID instead of categories because we don't need to have the object itself. We don't create, we're just setting up with the relation between the two different models, which is the book and the category. Now the next part is we are again similar to what we have done in our user. We'll say book DTO to destructure the book DTO, that part. Next part is we are going to use const updated book for our object, and in here we'll mention await book service update book. So in here it's asking for us two things. First, it's asking for us ID. So first things first, since this is a number, the first property is a number, and in the request.param we are getting a string, we'll do a casting. So we'll say number here, and inside the number we'll mention number ID. So we casted the ID to be a number instead of a string. The next part would be, it's asking for us the book DTO, and in here what we are going to do, similar to user, we will say book DTO, so spreading the book DTO, but we are changing our categories object. So in here we are going to use something called categories, which is the book that specifies the column, right? So we have categories, and in here we are specifying as an object. So in here what we are going to mention is, instead of saying create, we are going to use something called connect. And connect, as the name suggests, it connects something with another thing, and that thing is the category itself. It connects with the category specified, and in order for us to connect with that particular category, we have to specify the unique property of that table, and that will be the ID for us, because the primary key and the unique key for our category is the ID in itself. So we'll mention here connect, and inside we'll mention ID, and that will be category ID. Now so far so good, there's no problems here, and we will mention here, we'll just return this response.updated book. But before that we will say console log, so we'll try to log our updated book. So we'll try that out now. Now let's run our project and we'll say yarn dev here, and let's hope everything is fine, and yes, it is working fine. Now next part is we are going to go to our Thunder client, and in our Thunder client what we are going to make is a new request, and that new request is regarding books. So let me take this, put this here. Oh, okay, all right. So we'll create a new request with this part endpoint, some changes here, and the changes we are going to do is here books and the ID of the book itself, and that would be 1. So that's the endpoint for our, so let me save this part quickly because I didn't know I didn't save it. So when we go to our router, we see that it's asking for an ID. So that's the endpoint books 1 or 2 or 3, doesn't matter which one it is. So books 1, so we are changing our first book, and what we are going to change is we are adding a property called category ID, nothing more, nothing less. So we'll mention category ID, and in here we are going to say, for example, the category ID would be 1, and that will be it. Now what we have to do is change the operation, and that operation will mention as put, because that's what we have registered with. Now we'll just send it, and when we send it, the moment it sent, there was no problem, so it tried to update, but we didn't receive anything regarding to verify that we have our category ID registered, and that category ID is 1. So what we are going to do is similar what we have done before, the nested query. We are going to go to our book service. In our book service, similar to what we have done, include here get books author true, we'll include as well categories. So we'll say categories equals to common true. So that means that we are mapping the category as well. So books, when we receive the books, we'll receive as well the categories included in the books. So let's save that, let's run it again, and in here what we are going to do is we'll just mention localhost 3000, and in here we'll mention books. Now assuming, since we have specified the books, the first one, right, we are seeing here author, and here we are saying the categories. So that means that we are able to get the categories for that particular book, and other than the other parts, the other ones don't have the object of that particular category. Now we could do that similarly to our categories. We already have it, the nested query, right? So we'll just say categories of that endpoint, and we will see here the categories will have the books as well. So now what if we want to add another another category for this book itself? So another one, instead of just one itself, one object. So let's try to do that for the second property as well. So first what we need to do is create a new category. So we'll go to our post here, and in our post we'll mention it will be called horror, and that is our new category. We'll send this, and we created our new property. Now we'll go back to our request, previous request, which was books, localhost books, and in here instead of category 1 we'll be using category ID 2. So let's just update that to 2, and now what when we send it here, we are going to our we are going back to our books here, and we can see that we will receive our second property, that will be second object in our array called horror. So far so good. We have done the part where we receive the categories, and as well when we are going to our categories, we receive each of them their books as well, an array of books. And we have done it by doing the nested write or nested update, and the way we have done that is through the book controller. And the book controller, we mentioned instead of create, we use connect, and the connect is connecting between two different related queries. So that will be it for the many-to-many relationship. And the schema in itself, as you have noticed, it is much more simpler than the one-to-many or one-to-one relationship, where we just had to specify an array between those two. There's a more complex way of doing it, that is called explicit, but this one is the implicit relationship, many-to-many relationship, whereby we are just specifying the array and the type of the two different models. Next part what we have done is we finished our categories, where we created the two different endpoints, get categories and create categories. And the other part, in order for us to showcase the list between each other models, what we have done is we updated our update book here, the update endpoint, whereby we are updating one particular book with the specified ID given by the client. And in the book controller, we have changed our update book, and we received the parameter of the ID. We destructured the request.body, where we assume that we are getting category ID, and we deconstructed the book ID, and we received that book DTO. Now the next part what we have done here is we casted the ID to a number integer, and then we specified, as we spread our book DTO again here, and we mention here the categories. So we are mentioning the categories as new property, and that property is actually mapped towards our schema, and in our schema we mention as category. So if you changed it to something like this, we have to specify in the book controller as well that thing. So that would so anything that is related between those two models, right, we have to mention it in that way. So next part what we have done is, instead of using create, we have specified a property called connect, and that connect has the logic of connecting two different models, or like those two that are related together. And we have specified the primary key, or the unique key of that other related model, and that was actually the ID, and we named it as category ID. And then later on we just return the response of the updated book and receive the list of books relating each other. So that will be it for today, and for today's section with the many-to-many relationship. And I think that would conclude our many and one-to-many relationship, but we will be doing in the next video a one-to-one, or like a self-to-many relationship, like a related relationship, where in the schema we'll be having like category may have a relation between each other in itself, and we'll cover that in the next section. And yeah, in the meantime, I hope you have a great day, and take care.